The first question is, but I really don't want your responses right now. I've got a little bit that I want to talk about to get to those responses, but why use a discussion exercise to begin with? What are our goals? Why do we do it in a face-to-face class? And for goodness sake, why would we even think about doing that online? But I want to tell you, in the years that I've been teaching online, the online threaded discussions have been one of the highlights for me as a professor. And I find in my student comments at the end of the semester on evaluations and periodic check-ins I do with the students, they really enjoy the threaded discussions. And I'm not going to go into too much depth right now why, because I'd like you to think about that a little bit as we go through. So if you've never used a threaded discussion before on Canvas, I really encourage you to try it out since we've got a few more weeks left. But even if we go back to face-to-face classes in the fall, consider doing threaded discussions as part of your face-to-face class. Even when I'm teaching face-to-face, I do some of these in my classes as well. So I'm going to begin first by going over some suggestions that I have that I would tell faculty from the very get-go. What kind of guides me in approaching if and when I'm going to create an engaged discussion, why I would do it, perhaps the steps I would take. And then I have a couple of examples along the way for you. And so there will be opportunities for you to ask questions as we get to those points. First thing I do right off the bat is I think about the student learning outcomes I have. That is what I am teaching, why I am teaching, and that's what I'm hoping to accomplish through my approaches and through the content in my classes. So I don't create a discussion just to have a discussion. That's not the purpose. I really think about, well, why am I going to do this? How does it align with the objectives that I have for the course or for the unit? And then I usually provide some kind of context for the assignment. Usually I'll sneak in a little bit of teaching, that's what I call it. I sneak in teaching because maybe I'll put in a TED Talk or two that connect up with the content that I want to teach. Maybe I'll refer to a specific part of a chapter of the book that they should have read for that particular week. I may bring in news articles. Right now with the COVID-19 pandemic going on, I'm bringing in a number of news articles coming in. And in my American Public Discourse class, we're going to be reviewing how the media is framing the pandemic that we're in right now. So it just depends upon what your content area is. But bring in something that students might get excited about that still relates to what you're trying to teach in terms of your student learning outcomes. Then, this is really, really pivotal. And this takes time and effort. When I first began teaching online 5 or 6 years ago, I really had to think about the fact, I'm not in class with the students where somebody can raise their hand and maybe for the 15th time say, I don't understand, what do you mean by? When we give instructions for an online discussion, I think the most critical part, honestly, is this one. Give your students clear, very clear instructions. I would encourage you to consider connecting up with a colleague. Give them your assignment. Have them play the role of the student. What questions would they have? Are your instructions that are clear to you clear enough to somebody who may not have a real clue as to what you're asking for? So there's a number of things I do, and I feel like, oh my gosh, I am so wordy here. But I want to tell you, I don't get very many questions from students at all about how do I do this? That's really critical because it gives that student that feel that they really do understand what's going on. So I give very specific prompts. Another thing I do, and you may want to think about this, I do give a word limit. For me, that's really important. Why? Usually faculty might think, well, you want to make sure a student is writing enough. Well, that's true. That's part of it. But the other part is I want a student not writing too much. Now, why would I say that? Sometimes, and I think we all have this in our face-to-face classes, those students who just go on and on and on and on and on and don't give somebody else a chance to really respond. This could end up intimidating some students who decide, I'm not going to participate. So the word limit is really helpful. It helps orient a student in terms of what and how much depth do you want them to go into. It really relieves some of the stress for the student who might be a little reluctant to speak up because now they have an idea of what they're aiming for. And it kind of levels the playing field a little bit in terms of those students who are very verbose versus those that don't talk very much. So for me, the word limit is really, really critical. Also, really clear due dates and times. Now, I've been to other sessions since we started teaching remotely, and this, I think, is very critical. All of us, at least for me at least, but many of us in here, probably took a little while to get back into a routine. Can I see a show of hands? Where it took a little while to get into the routine of not having a routine? Okay, first of all, I should ask, does anybody know what day of the week this is? Type your answer in. I'll give you extra credit if you know what day of the week it is. So having due dates and times are really, really critical. I know people do this differently. Kim, I'm going to ask you to share because I know you do it a little differently from how I do it. I typically will have the first discussion prompt answer on a Saturday. And the reason is it's usually the one that's worth the most points. It's the original answer to a prompt. And students haven't seen others. Sometimes it takes them a while to really think about what they want to put down. I give them a full week, at least a full week. With the remote stuff that's going on now, I'm giving them about a week and a half to 2 weeks. I post them early so they have time to think about things. But I have my students usually post on a Saturday, and then the response back to a peer is maybe the following Wednesday or Thursday. Now, it depends on how I've set up the class. Routine is really important. So I make sure that in a particular class, it's Saturday for the first one, it's Wednesday or Thursday for the second one. In another class, I might do it differently. Mm-hmm.
Armeda, we have a question, and since we're on this topic here from time and providing specific prompts and word limits, one of the questions that's come up is, what would be a good word limit for a discussion?
Whoa, okay, that's hard for me to answer because it depends upon the prompts that you have. The 2 examples I'm going to share with you, you're going to see I have different word limits because it depends upon, is it the first response or is it the second response? Usually the first response I'll have as a larger word limit, and then the second response typically, although not always, is a shorter word limit. So it depends on the prompt that you're asking. And I think the question, I'll be able to answer that a little bit better when we look at the 2 examples. I hope that helps. One thing that's really important is not to make the word limit too long. Don't get into pages. Because if in a threaded discussion, students are responding to each other, and if you suddenly have like a 500 to 1,000 word limit, oh my gosh, you're going to have to keep scrolling down for about 15 minutes to get to the final one. So you want to keep them kind of short for the discussion. I hope that at least gives somewhat of an answer to the question. Okay, good. Thank you. Kim, I know you do something a little different from what I do. Do you want to share with them your due dates and the time that you use?
Yeah, I mean, it can vary, but typically I'll open up, they see the prompt at least a week ahead, similar to you. And then I typically use like a Thursday, Sunday deadline. So they have it, they can post early, but that first initial post needs to be by Thursday. And then I think 11:55 or 11:59 p.m. So they have to have it by that evening. And then their replies, they have a couple days for those replies. That way it spaces it out and you don't have everybody posting the last minute at 11:59 on Sunday. And then there's no time for discussion because nobody got to reply.
Yeah, I usually leave at least 4 days, 4 full days. And that's why sometimes it depends if it's a Wednesday or a Thursday. If we have a holiday in there, I go ahead, like when we had Cesar Chavez Day, I added an extra day on because theoretically that was a day off, although it was weird because we're already into this pandemic thing. So I would allow at least 4 days. The reason I do this is I have some students right now, believe it or not, they are working. They're back home. They're working maybe at a grocery store or someplace, and they need to earn money. They're not able to necessarily have all that, quote, free time that some students may have if they're just at home hunkering down in place. So it's really important to give them enough time. Plus, it gives them that thought time to be genuine and thoughtful and authentic in their responses back. Now, I do something different from Kim. I don't do the 11:59. I do a weird time. And I do that on purpose because for some strange reason, if you give students a consistent but weird time, they remember that weird time. This semester, I'm using 10:18 p.m. The reason I chose 10:18 p.m., well, I'm usually still up at that point. So if somebody suddenly is saying, oh my God, I can't do this, I'm usually awake where maybe I can send them an encouraging email. The other reason is when HSU was open, if they were having technical difficulties, they could get IT help at the library until 10 p.m. So I figured they were close enough to getting it in, hopefully, that if they ran into issues, there could be a way to solve it that evening. So I do it a little bit differently that way. Okay. I think carefully about the number of points that you want to give, and I would share with the students the number of points that each post is going to get. Typically, my first post is, because it's usually the longest one, I'll give that the most number of points, but I'm very specific in what the prompts is, the word limit, the due dates, everything I've said so far. So the students get an idea of, okay, this is worth this many points. Now, I'll be honest, through the years as I've taught more and more, because I feel confident in the discussions that I have developed for my students, and I think they are learning a lot from them, I have given my discussions more and more points. They're weighted more in my classes than originally. There's going to be an example I'm going to show you in a moment where there aren't very many points and it's quite a big prompt, but that was from the very first time I used it. And I have used that since.
And another question that's come up is like, what are your class sizes, and do you use smaller groups when navigating these?
Okay, I'm going to get to that question in just a minute if I can, because I've got a slide where I wanted to talk about it. So whoever asked that question, you are so smart, because you anticipated what I was going to cover in just a moment. So thank you for that. So Enoch, you have previewed what's to come in just a moment. And if I don't do it, break in and remind me to do it, but it's there. So I'll get to that in a moment. It's important, I think, to share a rubric. Later in the presentation, I have a rubric that I really like. It's from the University of Cincinnati, and I really like this particular one for discussions. And it'll be part of the PowerPoint, so it'll be a resource you'll have handy for yourself at the end. And then finally, the other thing I try to do, and I've been pretty successful, is I give a sample of what I am looking for. Sometimes I will do the assignment myself. I advise everybody, do your own assignments and see what it's like. I've changed some of my assignments after I tried to do it because I thought, oh, this is unrealistic. This isn't getting to what I want it to be. So I usually will share a sample, something that I've done, or I get permission from a student and I ask if I can share something they did with my future classes. And 9 times out of 10, students are so excited that I want to share something they developed that they give me permission to do so, but I make sure I get that in writing. So these are some very specific things that I do. And provide structure, do a step-by-step, again, getting back to very clear directions, a step-by-step rundown about how to organize the discussion post. Why do I do that? Makes it easier for the student, but you know what? Makes it easier for us too. Because when we're trying to grade, the more organized the post is, the easier, the more beneficial it is for us as professors to be able to know, are they meeting all those parts of that rubric that I'm using? So think about this as helpful for the student and helpful for you. And then consider giving your students some choices. Why do this? Well, it can help with differences in knowledge, differences in interest, intrinsic motivation. If I want them to, for example, right now in one of my classes, students are reading a chapter on culture shock. I came up with 2 really good TED Talks that talk about the concept of culture shock, firsthand culture shock, from 2 very different perspectives. One of the prompts is to watch both of the videos, and then the students choose one to do the discussion post on. So that way, there's a little bit of ownership, there's some choice, so it's a structured choice approach. That's not an oxymoron, but it's a structured choice situation. So I'm going to give you an example, and Enoch, quickly, where am I at time-wise?
Right now it's 10:18.
Okay, I'm going to go
so you
through
have
some of
12
these
more
really
minutes.
quickly. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly. This is a discussion that I use early in the semester. You'll notice this gets to the question that was there earlier. This is a class of 30 students. And what I did is, if I have 30 students, it depends upon what my goals are again. I typically divide my classes of 30 into 2 groups of 15. And I create 2 discussion groups. However, If there is something where I want closer collaboration, one of my classes this semester, I divided my class of 30 into 3 groups for one assignment, for one threaded discussion assignment, because I wanted slightly smaller groups and I wanted to mix the groups up a little bit. So most of the time, the students are in one of 2 discussion groups for the whole semester. Why do I do this? It opens up that opportunity to share back and forth. It gets back to the word limit question, because if you suddenly have 30 students writing to a prompt, it just gets really long. This way, the conversations are not as long and drawn out, and students get to know each other a little bit better. Students actually get fairly friendly by the end, or actually by the middle of the semester. By the end, they're good old pals, and so they like just talking to each other. So I really advise at the max 15. Even 15 stretches it a little bit in my mind. So it depends upon what you want to do. Whoops, let me go back. Okay. So that was the cultural artifact group discussion. This is early on in the semester. So you'll see it's a very simple activity. I have here my student learning objectives, so the students know what I want to do, plus I keep it in my head. This is what I want my students to get out of it. And again, all this will be available. If I go through it quickly right now, it's all going to be available in my Google Slides presentation, which you'll get. Then to complete the activity, I make sure they know what they need to do. So ahead of time, they can begin to think about this kind of thing. So provide the student learning objectives and what they will need to complete the activity. Here's a sample of what I wrote, and I won't go over it all with you, but I wrote this up for students to think a little bit about a cultural artifact for the US. I always gave a lecture face-to-face about refrigerator magnets being part of the US culture and what it means. So I wrote up a little sample that if I were doing this assignment, I would pick the refrigerator magnet. And I even found a little resource here, and I love the quote at the end here, if you can see it. Our fridge, the timeline of our life. And so for me, in a way, it's taking something I would do in a class, but I'm trying to make it conversational and just as vibrant within the context of an engaged discussion. And so I want to show you a quick example. I blocked out all my students' names, so you don't know who they are. But here's an example of what a student did. She brought in an Irish ring. She chose this artifact and she followed directions very nicely. Where her name is, the date, where the title of the artifact was supposed to be. I actually spell all that out for the students. And then I won't leave this up long, but if you look at the PowerPoint later, you can see what she wrote. It meets the requirements of what I was looking for. And keep in mind, this is an early post in the semester. And then what I do is immediately, early on, not so much later on, early on, I tried to respond quickly to students' responses. Why do I do that? I do that so that I model the kinds of responses I hope my students will give to each other. So let me repeat that. I try to early on model exactly how I want my students to respond to each other. So you'll see I say, hi, so-and-so. Okay, I want my students to use the first name of the individual. Make a comment about it, be very specific about it. You'll notice down here, what is a hand fasting ceremony? The student talks about the hand fasting ceremony, doesn't really describe it. So even if I know what it is, I may ask a question so that it allows for that discussion and allows for that description. So I think it's important. And then I always sign it, thanks for sharing. And what's really kind of cool is when I see my students kind of mimicking me along the way, it's kind of like we're teaching them how to respond to each other. And I think that's a really cool thing because it kind of teaches civility without that being one of my student learning outcomes. But that's what it starts to become. So model what you want, which is what I've done. Use student's name to respond to them and ask a question or two to encourage a student to continue or expand upon their discussion post. And I want to show you this real quick, and then I'm going to stop, see if there are any questions. This is a post that was given to the same one, the one about the Irish ring. So this is, you'll notice, so it's about 6 days after I had posted. And so she thought it was great about the hand fasting ceremony. In fact, she's done a Spanish version of it. I didn't even know there was a Spanish version of it. So I'm learning stuff along the way too. So it really started to get into a nice conversation back and forth. And this is something for you to consider. I've started doing this. I don't require students to reply to replies to their post. I hope that made sense. I don't require students to reply to the replies to their posts. However, if some students do, and if they start to reply to the reply and it actually becomes a genuine conversation back and forth, I'll give them extra credit. It'll just be a point or two, won't be a lot, but you know what? Those little extra credit points mean so much to students because it shows that you're recognizing them, that you're giving, hey, you know what? You're doing a great job here, keep at it, kind of that rah, rah, rah kind of thing. So that would be an extra credit type of thing that I would tend to do. And I just have to show you this if I can. I was so delighted. I didn't know does anybody know why the turkey bag represents Humboldt County culture? Oh, I know, I saw a couple of hands go up. I didn't know this. I've lived here for how many years? 38 years? I had no idea. I'm going to go ahead without calling on anybody to embarrass them. But I had no idea it was associated with the cannabis culture. So I learned a lot. And that was this semester when I got this response. So I'm learning a lot along the way. Try to create prompts where maybe you can learn something too. So I've learned more about Humboldt County culture than I ever thought I would, even at this point. So I'm going to stop here for a second. Why use a discussion activity? Why do an exercise in your class, whether it's face-to-face or online? And what questions or comments do you have at this point? Anything out there? I'm not hearing anything.
So a question around just the idea of discussions, engagement. Can you elaborate a little bit on, in a digital environment, how that may create a sense of social presence? So do you see that these discussions help students connect with one another?
Oh gosh, and I wish I could show you some great examples, but that would mean I have to blur out students' names to show you authentic examples. And I can't do that because of FERPA reasons. But the students really get into a great discussion back. They'll ask each other questions or say, whoa, I never thought about it that way. I've seen that mentioned quite a bit. Or that's really cool. Or, hey, how about, and they really honestly get into a good discussion. I think part of it is setting it up so that the discussion prompts aren't super, oh, how do I want to say it? Academic, that you add in a little bit of your own personality. I often add in visuals along the way. I wish I had my one on culture shock. I have a funny picture that introduces the whole idea of culture shock. And then with the videos, that helps reinforce it. So I'm just making students feel comfortable that what they have to say has merit. And that, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they just almost automatically, because you're feeling in a safe environment. Students are texting all the time. In a way, this is kind of like texting and FaceTime. I mean, they're already doing it socially. It's just moving it into the academic realm. So I'm hoping that gives you kind of a feel. I wish I could show you some examples, but I'd really have to go through and blur out a lot of stuff.
So we have time for, there's two questions.
Okay, let me get the two questions, and then I have two more things I want to go through.
Okay, just a few minutes left. So from Mari, do you think that those people who joined the online class before, soon before COVID, might be a self-selected group? And how do you help those who don't like the idea of online class?
Okay, the ones who joined before, well, everybody has to, okay, in my face-to-face classes, I'm going to talk specifically, because I am teaching some stuff totally online. Those students obviously have no problems because they've been doing it all semester. It was something I was planning to do in my face-to-face class anyway. And so I usually have something early on in the semester, so they've all gotten their feet wet a little bit. And what I typically do too, I do this with my tests, and I do it with my threaded discussions, because I have multiple threaded discussions. Let's say I will count 3 out of 4 towards the course grade. So students, again, there have a choice about participating or not. But I do strongly suggest they participate in the early ones so that at the end of the semester, they don't have to worry about it as much. So I'll be really honest, I do that with my tests, and I do it with my threaded discussions. And Enoch, real fast, there's more stuff I want to go over quickly.
So do it.
Wasn't there another question?
Well, we have a choice. We can field one more question and end, or you can address your concluding remarks.
Oh, darn. I've only halfway through what I wanted to do. Can I do a part two? I mean, I really prepared for this. I really want to show people.
We're gonna have to have a part two. How about that?
Okay. Then if there's going to be a part two, let me go ahead just over this real fast. I'll take the final question. I've got enough for a part two. So let me tell you one thing I decided not to do. Do you remember I had a little blurb in my early example of, I do the refrigerator magnet. I've done this activity before with a couple of different classes where students create a trading card as a way to introduce themselves. Personally, I found the trading card as challenging because I have some students who are really into the tech stuff and then some students not so much. And I found myself as an instructor spending a heck of a lot of time trying to explain to them. Even though I would give them directions, I would rewrite the directions, I'd send them to big, huge labs about how to do a trading card. Some of them just weren't getting it. So that's why I just do here, write up something and then just embed a photo of the item. It's not hard to do, but some students do have that fear of technology. And so if you present something they don't know how to do right off the bat, they kind of freeze up. Am I right about that? So I decided not to use this. However, what I did is I created, and I encourage you guys to consider doing this as well, developing a discussion in a Canvas where students can practice. I call it, as you see here, a practice pad. This is a discussion. There are no points attached to it, so it's not a graded discussion, but students can get in, they can practice embedding a picture if they want, so they're comfortable when they actually have to do it for a graded discussion post. This is the first time I've tried this, the idea of a practice pad. Notice that, now not everybody did it, but notice, I thought this was pretty good. There were 11 students that tried this out, and I thought that was pretty awesome. What was really cool is when a student was having problems and not knowing why their embedding of the image wasn't going the way they thought it would, another student, this is where we get into conversation, I didn't even have to do anything here. I don't think I even included a post for me. Another student would help them. They'd get online, post a reply, well, this is what you did, but this is what you have to do. The student would go back and edit based upon what another student told them to do. And then they thank that student and, oh my gosh, this was truly where a student was helping another student. And look how early in the semester that was. That was right at the beginning of the semester. So consider, especially for students who are not as tech savvy or that kind of, I'm not sure I really want to do this, create an opportunity by giving a discussion thread with no strings attached where they can practice, where they can feel safe. If they mess up, no one's going to laugh at them, that they can actually help one another. So I'm going to go ahead and end here so I get that last question. And nobody's going to know my big grand finale that I had planned unless I'm able to do the second half of my presentation.
We look forward to a part two. We'll be posting resources on the CTL and the Keep Teaching website for a review. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming. It's just so nice to see real life human beings again. And some of you are moving around, and that's really nice. Oh, we got a nice group there. Please come back for the second half.
Thank you.
Bye.